Oh, all right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals? Welcome back to another episode of the Hook It podcast. And very shortly, I'm going to be joined here in studio by Mike Pupius. Who is Mike? Well, we'll get into that in a sec. But first of all, got to give a big up to some of our show sponsors. And first up, saxunderwear.com. If you haven't already heard of Sax Underwear, where the hell have you been? In fact, I've just come back from Paris where I attended their international sales meeting, and let me tell you, this brand is killing it. They're making huge gains in North America and the UK, and it's down to people like you guys getting involved with the brand, trying a pair of Sax, and then realizing just how good, how actually life-changing this underwear brand is. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Black Sheep. Now, the Black Sheep is a natural thermoregulating and moisture-wicking pair of underwear. They are made of merino wool, which, as you know, will keep you warm when it's cold and cool when it's dry. I'll tell you a couple of key features of this pair as well. So, they feature the patented ballpark pouch, which keeps your nuts separated from your legs and stops any skin-on-skin friction. They are 3D fit, which means they are fitted around your major muscle groups, so no more riding down, no more riding up, no more unwanted wedges. They have flat out seams, and that means that the seams are actually flat. So unlike some cheap underwear brands, the seams will be on the inside, and you will notice that they'll start to chafe, especially around the outside of your legs, maybe around your ass. No more chafing from the seams. They are thermoregulating, moisture wicking, they are odor resistant, and they have a fly too, which means if you like to come through the gate rather than over the wall, boom, you can get that dingling straight out, do what you need to do. They are made of 95% merino wool, 5% elastane, and are available from your local ski, bike, skate, fashion retailer, or head to saxunderwear.com to find out more about the Black Sheep and their entire range of underwear and sleep products. We are also brought to you by Works and their Hydro Shot Jet Wash. This thing is insane. Big thank you to these guys for getting involved with the podcast recently. We did a giveaway a couple of episodes ago. The guy who won that is stoked. Look out on our Instagram for some photos of him using it. But yeah, the Works Hydro Shot redefines the way you clean. We've all been there, lugging around a huge petrol jet wash, pathetically trying to clean a bike with half a bottle of Evian or whatever you've got left after you've been riding, or even worse, loading a filthy bike into the back of your car or van. The HydroShot runs on a PowerShare battery and draws fresh water from any source. Now, especially if you live in Europe or the UK, that's going to get pretty important through winter. Water pipes are freezing, you can't connect to your outside tap because it's going to be frozen. So if you need to clean your bike off, you can dip the attachment which comes with the HydroShot into a bucket of warm water that you can maybe get from your house. Dip it into a river, pond, whatever. You can dip it anywhere and it will give you water and you can clean your bike. The rotating head allows switching from mist through to pulsating sprayer capable of eliminating caked on dirt. There's countless applications for the HydroShot too, from cleaning your bike, car, clothing, decks, pets, family members, patios, gutters, outdoor furniture, family members again. I mean, everything needs cleaning. What don't you want to be dirty other than the obvious? The big question, where do you get one of these things from? You can head to Works retailers, Amazon, Argos, Halfords, Toolstation, their official eBay store, or head to works-europe.com where you can find out more information and grab yourself a Works HydroShot too. So big up Works. Thank you for your support for this podcast. We're also brought to you by hookitproducts.co.uk. Don't forget, if you're a listener to this podcast, enter the promo code podcast on hookitproducts.co.uk. That'll get you 10% off anything and everything in store. Easy as that. Okay. Every episode of the podcast, we also give away a pair of Sax underwear. Now, I like to save this until we've done a bit of the housekeeping, just to say, again, a bit of a more of a longer thank you. So all you have to do if you want to win yourself a pair of Sax underwear is share this podcast episode or leave a review on iTunes. Now, that's the preferred thing too, guys. I'll be honest with you. The preferred things, head to iTunes, leave a review, write something out, make it as funny as possible or as critical as possible. It doesn't have to be a positive review, just any review gets you in with a chance of winning a pair of Sax underwear. And this week, if your in iTunes handle is Sarge, Sarrge, then you have won yourself a pair of Sax underwear. Just reach out on Facebook or Instagram or drop me an email and we'll send you a fresh pair of Sax in the post instantly. Okay, on today's episode, I am joined by Mike Pupius. Now, some of you might be thinking, who is Mike Pupius? Well, now I have the studio here in Sheffield. It's cool to be able to bring in people that are local, that have impacted my life or that I think are going to be beneficial to you guys. So Mike is a mindfulness meditation expert. I did his course a couple of years ago, which had a profound effect on my life, gave me the tools to be able to handle stress and anxiety a little bit better. And I thought, now we have the studio, let's bring Mike in for a bit of a chat. I guess we also call this one a secret session because you guys didn't know it was going to drop today. So yeah, Mike's an absolute hero. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's worked in some huge corporations teaching mindfulness. He's had a really, really cool career. And some of the stuff he's doing now as a volunteer with mindfulness, he's trying to make Sheffield a mindful city. He's leading walks. He's getting involved with helping refugees. I mean, this guy he's a saint, I'll be honest with you. What an amazing guy Mike is. So without further ado, going to hand over to a little bit of Zeb and then we'll get straight into this episode with Mike Pupius. Enjoy, and I hope you guys take something away from this podcast. There is also, before we get going, a 3-minute meditation at the end of this podcast, which I have made a separate download. So if you want to do that before you get into this episode, there is a link in the show description. So you can go and you can download that for free. It's just 3 minutes. It's a basic mindfulness meditation. And hopefully, again, that's a tool that you guys can use in the future, or it's an introduction into meditating more often. Okay, God, enough waffle from me. Let's get into this episode, guys. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Hook It podcast, endorsed by @OW_23. Add me, tag me. Follow me. Please follow me.
A young boy, growing old. I never listened to anyone. I did what I was told. Tell me once, so twice, 3 times, a little lady. Follow the rainbow to the party and go dig, hole in the soul.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, man. Should we get into it?
Yeah, sure.
We should be good. Okay, we'll do a brief introduction, man. Because I think we should. Because I think, like we were talking about in the cafe before, often people's names will come up on the podcast feed and they'll be like, "I know who that guy is." But with this one, we're coming fully out of left field, aren't we? So it's cool. I want to thank you for doing it there as well. Before we get into this, thank you so much for taking some time out. Mike Pupius, is that right?
Yeah, Pupius.
Pupius.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's give a little bit of context to people listening as well. So we met doing what was it called? It's a business, I can't remember the name of what Dave calls it.
It was Dave Hemborough's business network.
Business network, yeah. So we met through that, didn't we, initially?
And you came on.
Yep, and then
course,
after meeting you there and hearing some of your wisdom and insights into mindfulness, I came and did your, was it a 6-week course? It felt like 8-week course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
really should get my facts straight, shouldn't I?
Stuck it for 8 weeks.
Yeah. So me and my girlfriend did your 8-week course with John, and it was all about meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
And like I said in the cafe below, mindfulness and meditation's come up a lot on this podcast, and I thought, now we have this beautiful studio to use, why not get somebody in here who really knows the stuff about these sort of topics and just be able to chat some stuff through and the benefits and, you know, the way it's impacted my life as well, especially doing that course. Me and my girlfriend, you know, we still talk about how we were really present after that. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. You know, right after we'd finished each session, they were usually a couple of hours, weren't they, in the evenings?
It's time for 2.25 hours. So we do 24 hours of contact time,
right?
Including a day retreat.
That's right,
about
the day retreat.
3/4 of the way. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So we did that, and we always talk about how after doing it, we were talking a lot more than we were before. We were a bit more in touch with our feelings and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, why not get you on here to talk about it a little bit more in depth? So let's start at the beginning and tell me, because I don't know too much about you other than your work now. So like, where did you grow up, and like, tell me a little bit more about yourself, if that's okay.
Okay, yes, I was born in Surrey, brought up in and around Purley, which is on the A23 Brighton Road.
Okay.
So we used to get the old crocs come through, and cyclists now, and so on. So my father was a bus conductor. We lived in a council house. The money was quite often tight, but I was fortunate to go to a grammar school in Reigate Grammar School, on a scholarship. And interestingly, big names that have also gone there, Sir Keir Starmer and David Williams, are old boys.
Right.
So I'm not as famous as them. But it was interesting. I started off studying biological sciences at Edinburgh, decided that wasn't for me, and got a management training job in what was then called the post office telephones.
Right.
So I had a whole range of training and jobs in the post office. I moved from post office telephones to the post office bit that delivered letters and parcels and ran post offices, and ended up, to cut a long story short, here in Sheffield as the district head postmaster.
Right.
And I was the last district head postmaster because about a year into the job, I had a visit from the big man from Scotland, John Mackay, who was the general manager. It was my son's birthday, and he said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to reorganise next year, and your job is going." So they did away with all these posts called head postmasters.
Right.
I was responsible for Sheffield, South Yorkshire, and North Derbyshire, and I had 2,500 staff. So it was a big job.
Wow.
With a turnover then of about 50 million. So, and I thought, bloody hell, what am I going to do now? My job's going next
How long
year.
How long ago was that?
That was in the early 90s.
Right. Okay.
So how do I get around that? But we'd been introduced, my office and a number of others, to something called total quality management, and we were in the pilot of that, and a whole initiative called Customer First was being rolled out, and I got quite interested in that. Having a bit of an academic background, and I'd studied also at the Open University, did a diploma in management studies. I really got into this, and it was a breakthrough really, because I got a job then as a director of a newly formed division covering the northeast of England. So there I moved up to a job which was originally called Director Quality, and I used to get ragged because quality, my letters don't arrive on time, but this was the holistic approach to quality, where we were looking at the whole organisation in an holistic way. And that moved on to adopting a European framework for management called the European Foundation for Quality Management Business Excellence Model. There are a lot of long words in what I've done.
Yeah, there are.
I then, my job was rebadged as Director of Business Excellence and Planning. So I was responsible for this holistic approach to introducing quality, process management, getting customer feedback, staff feedback. And I took on the business planning role for a division which had 18,000 staff and a $500 million turnover. So, I've been up there operating in quite big organisations. The link with meditation, because I think that's the focus, was in the early 90s, before the guy said your job's going, that would have been high stress. I was managing this district around Sheffield, and our main processing centre had a major issue with asbestos. The main sorting centre, which processed about 1 million letters a day, was riddled with it because it had been used to strengthen the beams and the girders, and it was beginning to flake off. So I had to go through a process there where my team were managing a major operational centre for the whole of South Yorkshire. At the same time as bits of it were quarantined off, put into air. There were contained air pressure areas, and I was dealing with that. I mean, I remember one day they said, "Hey, Mike, the plastic sheets to keep the sort of pressure right," and somebody had pulled them down. So potentially the whole of the operational unit was could have been paralysed. But with the technical services manager, Brian, and I said, "Come on, Brian, we've got to go and have a look." And so he said, "Okay, you first." So here I was going into a contaminated area. So that was one issue of stress. But then my youngest son had contracted food poisoning, which led, to kidney failure.
Right.
And so he was really very seriously ill. So a combination of that, my stress levels went through the roof.
Right.
And I decided to do something about it, asked the doctor about it. He couldn't give much, stress is, well, you just got to live with it. But I'd read about transcendental meditation, and I signed up and did a 6-week program learning how you do transcendental meditation, which is different from what we teach on the course. On the course, we teach a whole range of different types of meditation. Transcendental meditation, you basically focus just on a mantra, which is a simple, often only a two-letter word, like Om. And you just say that over and over again for 20 minutes. And I did that, morning and evening. I used to come home, and I actually used to go upstairs and lie on the bed quite often. After a shattering day, you'd fall asleep. But that calmed me. It calmed the family, and it calmed the team I was working with, and we, it had a positive impact on the people around me. And so I did that for a year or two. I can still use that as a way of meditating, but I tend not to use anything now. But interestingly, I'd started with a gym run by a guy called Joe Mappin, a great guy, and he used to call himself a fat kid from Attercliffe.
Right.
Because he had a bit of a working class background, worked in the steel factories, I think work study, and decided to go it alone as a personal trainer.
Right.
And he'd set up this little operation using one of the colleges, Stradbroke College, and he pitched at senior executives around Sheffield. So suddenly, I was doing workouts with some of the senior executives in Sheffield, one of my good friends introduced me to it, and he was the CEO and chairman of Dyson.
Oh, wow.
So we go there, 7 o'clock in the morning, we do 45-minute circuit training, but the last 15 minutes was on a exercise mat, doing either relaxation exercises, which was a form of meditation, and sometimes a meditation. I remember a woman came in, one of the people from the college, and she did a meditation on imagining a flower, growing and so on.
Right.
So I'd got introduced to, sport again, because, I'm not very
you're not
sporty,
really...
but also meditation. And the mantra thing gave way to doing this exercise in the gym, but it led then to Joe said, "We're going to do a run on Saturday. You want to come along?" And he set up a little group from this gym that ran on Saturday mornings out of Endcliffe Park. And it was up to Ringinglow and back.
Okay.
So it was about 10K. So I went from being pretty unfit, highly stressed with Joe, to being much fitter, and being, first of all, able to do the run up to Ringinglow.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Okay, we're going to do a half marathon next year." So we did the Sheffield half marathon. He said, "Okay, we've done that. we'll aim for a medal in the World Student Games marathon. So we said, let's train for the marathon next year. And as a training run, we did the London Marathon in April, and then we did the World Student Games marathon in I think it was July.
And
August.
how do you do the student games? What age were you then?
I was about. This probably gives my age away. About 40.
Oh yeah, really? So you can
Yeah.
still do the World Student Games if you...
Yeah, well, the marathon was open to anyone. So
Oh, right, okay.
The big thing was, I got a medal in the World Student Games.
Amazing.
But anyone who entered for the marathon got one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't exactly do a world-class time. I think I came in about 4:21.
Did you?
But the thing is, I did better in the London Marathon actually than the World Student Games Marathon. And then I went on to do 2 other Londons, so 4 in all, 4 marathons in all, trying to get my time under 4 hours, which I did I think I got it, I actually ran under 4 hours in the second year, and I got an official time under 4 hours in the third year.
Nice one.
So we wandered off a bit, but that was my first introduction. So anyway, that took me through this major reorganisation, high stress, and I sailed through it because I was running and I was training and I was fit. People used to say, "You look well, Mike."
Really?
Anyway, the job gave way after a few years of doing this Director of Business Excellence and Planning. My sort of skill set then was understanding how this business excellence model worked, this European framework, which had been developed in Brussels. And I was fortunate to go on a personal development course, which interestingly said, well, what do you want to do? And I knew I'd reached the ceiling in Sheffield. I didn't want to go back and work in London. I spent a number of years working in London.
Right.
So I said, well, I'd quite like a secondment. A secondment is where you go off and do stuff in another organisation. So I got seconded to work with the European Foundation for Quality Management in Brussels. So I was commuting from Sheffield to Brussels for 2 years. And my job was to promote this business excellence model to the public sector of Europe.
Okay.
There was just me doing it, and I had to influence Europe to take it on.
Jeez.
So I mean that was interesting. That probably did 27 countries, but again bringing it back to the meditation. The 20 minutes, half an hour when they're messing around, closing the hatches and that sort of thing. I used to meditate. I used to close my eyes and do the meditation.
Right.
And that particularly coming back from Brussels on a Friday afternoon, usually the plane was late and that sort of thing. Calm me down, ready for the weekend. And that then led, because of my expertise in this business excellence framework, I chaired a Cabinet Office committee that was looking at applying it as a basis for benchmarking across the whole of the public sector. And I chaired this committee that was chivying up some of the senior civil servants to do better in terms of applying it. But that put me in touch with the organisation that looks after universities, the Higher Education Funding Council.
Right.
And I was invited with the Cabinet Office guy to do a presentation to people from universities about the business excellence model, and the person who chaired it was the incoming Vice-Chancellor of Sheffield Hallam. So I got talking to her, and so on one thing, she advertised a job for, forget what it was actually, it was a director job, I think it was Director of Quality or something. But anyway, I got a job in Sheffield Hallam as Director for Organisational Excellence. So again, I had a career with long job titles, district head postmaster, earlier in the post office, telecommunications traffic superintendent, now director of organisation. There was never a name badge on the door to get the title. And then did a number of things, but put in student and staff experience surveys, introduced the university to the idea that you don't manage by hierarchy and rank. The best way to manage an organisation is through processes. So got them thinking about processes and process improvement, and worked with a consortium of universities to try and introduce these newer ideas on leadership and management to other universities and
Right.
led a project over about 6 years involving about 5 other universities, including big ones like Durham. So after that, things came to an end. Did some consultancy work with Dubai, who were, the Sheikh Mohammed Maktoum, who runs Dubai, said, we're going to do excellence. And when he says we're going to do excellence, they do excellence.
Yeah.
They did it in a really big way. And I did a number of projects with Dubai and ended up leading teams of managers from the big Dubai corporations to benchmark against some companies in the UK and also in the Netherlands.
Right.
And then retired.
Okay, right. I'm going to unpack that a little bit, just so people can really maybe understand how it might have felt back then as well for you. So you said that when you were working in the post office, you had the problems with the asbestos, and you first started to feel stress and probably anxiety, which were they like on the sort of like map back then? Did it exist, like being stressed?
Yeah.
Obviously stressed, but anxiety or stuff like that?
Not really, no.
No,
I mean, I'd been in a situation a few years earlier when my son was born. I went to the doctor and said my legs are aching, and they actually put me through a number of tests. But I ended up coming away with a bottle of Valigan, which is a sedative that you can give to children, so we could get a good night's sleep.
Really?
So I was finding the stress then was caused by the fact that I was then a regional marketing manager. That was quite a high-profile job, a lot of travelling around the northeast of England. But my son, my eldest son, just didn't sleep.
Right. So you were just exhausted.
I was absolutely exhausted.
Right.
But in the stress that I was getting through the job, we knew the family doctor socially, and he couldn't prescribe anything. He mentioned self-hypnosis.
Right.
But anyway, I think I must have read about it, and that's why I tried the meditation.
Yeah.
Now it's much more recognised that stress is a problem. I remember I was sitting in my office in Pond Street, and one of my managers, Porrick Hibberson, had been doing some work with an academic from Sheffield University Management Centre. And the guy asked me, Mike, he came in to see me just to introduce himself. How do you manage stress? And I can remember, and I broke out into a cold sweat just thinking about managing stress.
Right.
But he was the guy that said, well, have a word with Richard. He knows this guy, Joe. And that led me into...
Oh, is that Joe?
Joe Mappin.
Right.
The other interesting story about Joe Mappin is that, kept in touch with him. He had a major career breakthrough. He became the personal trainer for Eddie Healy, the guy who built Meadowhall.
Oh, really?
And I understand, I mean, even a year ago, he was still going over to Eddie's mansion, an estate over in West Heller, I think it is. And he goes there when Eddie's in the country every day, gets there at 7, they do workouts and things like that.
Right.
So Joe had, progressed quite amazingly into a whole new area. So anyway, stress management was what seemed to be an unknown issue, but then I found that meditation could help. Also, doing the gym linked with some form of relaxation and meditation. And that's what Dave Hembrough does with his Mindfully Strong.
Yeah.
And then things have moved on. So I think the marathon running, and I kept that up into the early noughties. I think the last run I did was the Eam half marathon, which I had a leg injury, so I finished when everyone else was going home, I think, because it's a hell of a half marathon, the hills.
Well, anything.
My wife was there.
Pretty tough, isn't it?
She came over to me and hugged me and said, "You're never going to do that again."
I did my first marathon a few months ago.
Oh,
I did the Loch Ness Marathon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, to raise some money for the RNLI, which was
brilliant.
really cool.
Yeah.
But one thing I really enjoyed about doing the marathon actually was I said to myself, just as I started training, was that I was going to try and do it without headphones.
Yeah.
Because whenever I've run in the past, or pretty much anything I do,
Yeah.
I put headphones in and I'll listen to a podcast or music. And I said to myself, right, I'm going to train for the whole thing without headphones, and I'm going to run the marathon without, well, you can't run that marathon with headphones because it's an open road.
Yeah.
So they ban headphones anyway. But it was really nice because, again, as I've come into more like stressful times in my life, I've noticed that I do need to have that time where you're just off and you're just in your own head, like just thinking a little bit. It's almost like it became a bit of meditation for me in the evenings, was going for a run and just being on my own,
Well, that's right. I mean, the thing is, you are promoting podcasts, and you see a number of people out walking, even running. And, I know Dave, for example, wears headphones and listens to podcasts.
Yeah.
But that doesn't enable you to become meditative as you run.
Yeah.
So, I used to understand, having done the transcendental meditation, that my long distance running and training for marathons, I was going up to 18 miles, running around the whole of the Lady Bower Reservoir, going over, Hallenkirk Trail,
Right.
Stanage and so on. I didn't have headphones much in those days. But that was a meditative experience.
Yeah,
And because of the job I was doing, I was having, to be pretty creative. And I found ideas. I had a problem at work. We were developing something, and ideas would pop into the head.
Yeah.
So I think that whole area of doing things like walking and running without the distraction of something in your ears, where the focus is actually on the running, and you have to be pretty mindful, particularly when you're doing fell running, because of the terrain. You can't trip up.
Yeah.
I think that does get you into a state where you can be even more creative. So that brings back to what I'm doing now. Is the condition you get into is something called transient hypofrontality. Now, I'll tell you, I've had a career of big, long words.
I know, yeah.
What that means is a bit of the brain shuts down and enables ideas to pop up.
Okay, and what's it called again? Sorry.
Transient hypofrontality.
Right.
So it's almost suppressing the bit of the brain that's stopping you thinking of bright ideas. So if you look into that, then major thinkers like Darwin, I suspect Einstein, Heisenberg, a lot of these big names used walking as a means of creativity. Wordsworth walked something over 100,000 miles. His sister was a big walker, and they recognised how walking was important for their forms of creativity. I mean, I was on holiday in Kirkby Lonsdale. We had a few days up there walking, and in Kirkby Lonsdale there's the Ruskin View.
Right.
And Ruskin was into this, the Ruskin View is just over the river in Kirkby Lonsdale, the Loon, I think it is, and over to the sort of the hills and the mountains behind. And the view introduces this sort of sense of awe. Right. And then his mate, J.W. Turner, the painter, painted the view as well. So there's a painting of that.
Oh, wow.
So it's that sort of thing. When you're out in the countryside, particularly in nature, and particularly doing things like, I guess, biking.
Oh, 100%. People always say, riding a bike is a form of meditation.
And running.
Yeah.
It's a richer experience if you have a focus, because you've got to focus on the running, but your wider awareness comes in and all your senses get hyper-tuned. What you can see, what you can smell, the wind on your face, sometimes the rain.
Yeah.
All that is about getting into a mindful meditative state. So there's a number of definitions of mindfulness and meditation. Sometimes there's a conflation.
Yeah.
But our definition is that it's the optimum point between attention and awareness. So the simplest meditation, you will focus your attention on the sensations of the breath as it passes through your nostrils. Yeah. So it's a very narrow focus. But then in the lead up to that, you can then still be aware of what's going on in the space around you.
Right.
So there's some of these, it's a balance that you get into.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going along, walking as I do, because when I retired, just to put it in, I became a volunteer ranger for the Peak District.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying that.
You're walking along, and you have to focus, where your feet are going and so on. But suddenly you hear the call of a buzzard. You can then focus your attention on the buzzard, but you can only do that if you've kept your wider awareness of what's going on, and you haven't got headphones on. So,
true, very true. Yeah.
Again,
Yeah, they can be quite isolating, I think, sometimes, the headphones and just and stress as well, just being in your own head.
Yes.
It's quite isolating in a weird kind of way. You like isolated yourself into your own head.
You run into people literally because people have got headphones on.
Or looking at the phone,
looking at
which
the
is
screen.
the worst thing.
Well, one of the things is dealing with distractions, and these it's a balance though. You've got the interest in what the topic is on the podcast, but then you might have to balance that with, well, I don't have to listen to all that all the time.
Yeah. So do you remember then a time, I think you might have just alluded to it a little bit, but a time when you became more aware of how the meditations were like really starting to change your life? Was it when you were still at the post office then and it was just a stressful time?
I think I became much more able at managing the stress in difficult situations. I'd had other training as well,
right?
So that kicked in for some of the really difficult.
And was it back then? Was it a little bit woo woo? Was it sort of frowned upon when you said to people, "This is what I'm doing"?
Yeah, I mean, it was always the wacky thing.
Yeah.
Because it came in particularly the late 60s, early 70s,
Okay.
the California thing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think, is that sort of obviously not where it really started, because it's, its roots are hundreds of thousands of years old, no doubt, but...
About two and a half, yeah.
Is it? Right, okay. But where did it become a lot more mainstream? Did it start overseas, do you know, like the States, something like that?
Yes, I mean the whole approach to meditation, transcendental meditation. The Beatles did it.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
the Maharishi. They were disciples of the Maharishi who developed the whole of the TM approach.
Yeah, got you.
But I suppose the breakthrough for the teaching of mindfulness was created in the States by a guy called John Kabat-Zinn, who was a doctor, I think, at Massachusetts Institute of Technology Hospital, and was working with patients with stress, anxiety, and chronic pain, where often the only solution is to give some form of, sedative or antidepressant or something like that.
Yeah.
And set up a stress clinic and introduce people to meditation and to simple mindful movement in a program that began as like it was called like stress reduction or something. It became known as mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR.
Right.
So that was in the early 80s, and that spread clinically around the world. I think, millions of people have been through that course, and it is the sort of the main one that started off.
Right.
It was then developed further by a professor at University of Oxford. There's a centre for teaching mindfulness there, and that was known as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy.
Okay.
So cognitive behaviour therapy, CBT, was a recognised therapy approach used by the NHS. This became mindfulness-based, so meditations were put into it.
Right.
So those were the two main ones, but they are therapy-based. And what John Darwin and I teach is a life enhancement approach. So we're not therapists,
No.
We're not trained as therapists. We teach an approach which is introducing people to the principles of mindfulness. That's one main point through a whole series of different types of meditation. So people can then choose what they like, whether they like a body scan lying on the floor or whether they prefer to sit cross-legged and just focus in on their breathing, or do a visualization meditation. It might be, a mountain meditation or a lake meditation. I did one last night at a session we had where we meditated on autumn and falling leaves. So that's one component. The other component in our program, which is very different, is that we introduce the principles of positive psychology.
Okay.
And then there's mindful movement.
Yep.
which is simple yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. For example, the 8 pieces of brocade we did in our session last night. And certain key principles. And this is where the words sort of blur with a Buddhist approach. Although we teach it in a secular way, no religion or gods or anything like that. But I use the word loving kindness,
Yep.
not used much, but it's about being kind to yourself and being kind to others and wishing others happiness. Compassion, which is the idea of self-care, looking after yourself, but then being mindful of where something's not right in somebody you love, a family, friends, but then looking wider at what's going on in the community, and actually taking it up to earth level,
Right.
and being compassionate about what is being done to the earth at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's breadth, and then underpinning all of that is the principle of equanimity, which is about balance, and that was the topic for our session last night, creating balance, and supported by the 4th element of what we call the 4 immeasurables,
Okay.
empathetic joy, which is experiencing joy in the success of others.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, if your children do brilliantly at school, maybe if your team wins. I know one just across the road is doing quite well.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
So there's a lot of empathetic joy. But at the moment in the university, there's graduation going on. And I
Right.
used to sit on the platform when the students were coming past to get their degrees. And you could see the smiles on their face, but in particular, the parents, the uncles and the aunts in the audience. Sometimes you'd see tears in the face. That's empathetic joy.
Yeah.
You know, the joy that they get seeing their son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter get the degree.
Get the degree. Yeah.
And so anyway, those are the main components. So we simplified that down because we realised that people sometimes have difficulty, having a regular practice of meditating every day.
Definitely.
So we got something now called the 10-10, which we say, try and do a 10-minute meditation, and there's a whole range that we offer. Try and do 10 minutes of informal mindfulness, and that might be going out for a walk, walking the dog, as you do, tending to the garden and the chickens in your case. But a whole range of things which you can do, which people do. Fishing is often a mindful activity. And the third is some form of mindful movement. I mean, we advocate yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. I do Pilates, but going for a run. I can get into a mindful meditative state doing spinning in the gym.
Right.
So it is almost saying mindfulness is a lot more than just meditation. That's what trains the mental muscle and enables you to become mindful much more easily, less distracted by things that are going on, much more able to deal with the triggers that cause the feelings of stress and anxiety. Because what people don't realise that the thoughts and feelings, emotions, are just thoughts and feelings and emotions. Mindfulness ultimately enables you to observe them. And so suddenly somebody overtakes you, stupidly, cuts in front, triggers a hint of road rage coming up. You feel angry. You start chasing after them. You go and tailgate them. But that is just the very quick reptilian brain response to a trigger of anger. If you create a mindful space between that stimulus and the response, you can say to yourself, "Oh, I'm not going to be bothered by that stupid guy," and you suppress the anger by noticing that the anger's arising. So there's some very subtle distinctions here. It's about being able to observe what is going on, because you realise that thoughts, feelings, and emotions are transient. They're like leaves in a stream. They come, you let them be, and then you let them go. So that is the subtlety of what all this is about. It is recognising that our consciousness is incredibly complicated. we've all got monkey minds, but all of this combination of those elements helps you keep everything under some form of better control.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just equipping yourself with a toolkit, right? Of being able to notice, right, I feel this way.
It is the noticing.
It's noticing it.
Yeah.
Like you said, perfect example actually of like being in traffic,
Yeah.
someone cuts you up.
Yeah.
It's noticing that and going, right, I need to insert this tool here
Yes.
to calm me down. And at the end of the day, you might just go, it doesn't really matter. I'll be
Yes.
0.1 of a second later to where I'm going, or whatever.
Yeah. Because it just starts with a breath. All you need to do is to take a breath. I mean, we have a little practice called stop. You're at the traffic lights. You start fiddling around with your car. But you could stop, take a breath, then open to what's going on around.
Yeah.
Just noticing, there's an old lady there, somebody behind fiddling with a phone. You notice much more. Then proceed. You can do it in a queue, and you can do it letting somebody through the door. So it's these very subtle things, just stopping and taking a breath. My old grandmother used to say, when I used to get in an agitated state, because it must have been something I was born with, just take a few deep breaths. I used to forget something, go back into the house. She said, just turn round or count to three. I mean, some meditations say, count to 3 or 4 on the in breath and 3 to 4 on the out
Like
breath.
box breathing, something like that.
And we were doing some coherent breathing exercises last night, and there are apps on this. And John was playing this record where we were going, and it was like a musical sound, a chord, breathing in and breathing out. And I think we were doing 5 a minute, something like that.
Wow.
I don't know, that there was a frequency that he set it at. And we all noticed, because there was feedback from the group, that we'd calmed down just by breathing in and breathing out slowly. There's a European approach to mindfulness called sophrology. You can look it up, and there's some interesting YouTube videos on it. But one of them is you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8.
Yeah.
And if you do that for 4 or 5 minutes, it's meant to be a good way of getting to sleep.
Really, right.
So there are all these, and they're all linked to recognizing that the body is complex, the neurosystem, the nervous system is complex. And what I was saying last night is this takes you to look at why does this work? And not many people have heard of the vagus nerve.
No, this is interesting actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
But because just putting another thing in, but both John and I, who run the Centre for Mindful Life Enhancement, did master's degrees at Aberdeen. I graduated in 2015. What's that? 4 years ago.
Oh wow!
So I'm a recent
Brilliant.
master's graduate. But we were invited to look at every aspect, and I was quite keen on the neurophysiology of it. So anyway, you find the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve.
Okay.
And it innervates the whole of the sort of chest and stomach area, goes into all the organs. It's called the vagus because it's the Latin for wanderer. It wanders all around.
And is it a physical?
It's a nerve. It's
physical
a big nerve,
right.
and it goes through the neck. And I think there is a process where you can calm yourself just by tapping the side of your neck there.
Right.
You can also kill somebody by doing it. It's called the vagal punch. It's what James Bond uses.
Yeah.
Anyway, the vagus nerve creates that balance, that equanimity between the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a bit of the nervous system that calms you down, helps you deal with anger and that sort of stuff, and the sympathetic nervous system, which creates all the drive. You've got to go out and do stuff. You've got to go win a race. But if these two bits of the nervous system are out of balance, and this is back to the equanimity, you get into a situation where it's the stress and anxiety and depression build up.
Right.
So the realization is that through this abdominal breathing, which we suggest people do when they meditate, and the focus on the breathing helps to calm the body down through stimulating the parasympathetic bit of the nervous system and balancing the other bit.
Right.
Right. The other bit of the brain, so that deals with the anger, the fight and flight bit. When we were reptiles, we had to run away, but we also had to go and get food, which is the strive drive. There's a soothing bit of the brain, which then helps, is stimulated by this parasympathetic. And that's also linked to care and nurturing. So another cranial nerve goes into the face,
Okay.
and causes you to smile.
Right.
And that's what mothers do when, they see their baby. It's very difficult not to smile when you see a baby. But that is a soothing impact on people to do that. And when you look at all the stuff that we do, to actually get control of the vagus, meditation helps, the different types of meditation. So all the exercise, yoga, tai chi, qigong can help develop the vagal tone. Cold showers, pampering, going to a spa, chilling out, that sort of thing.
Right.
So a whole range of things helps enhance vagal tone. But you can measure it, and athletes now, elite athletes, are using vagal tone as a measure of how their fitness training is going.
How is it measured?
Well, this watch, if I link it up to a chest-band heart monitor, I can measure it on this. It's one of the
heart rate variability.
Heart rate variability is HRV. Yeah. So and you can see that it's measuring the difference between the heart rate when you're breathing in and the heart rate when you're breathing out. Okay. So, as I say, it all connects together.
Yeah.
The central nervous system, recognizing these different elements in the brain, and how this whole of this approach to mindfulness, not just meditating, but knowing what can go on. Some of these simple tools and practices, can start to get you in better control of what's going on.
It's interesting. One thing I was really keen to ask you, being a older gentleman, is that fair?
I'm pretty old.
Okay, older gentleman.
I've been around a long time.
How much effect do you think just sort of modern day living is having on stuff like this, like stress and anxiety? Because one thing that's really scary is how much we are spending on our phones, how much people are working, just everything basically. It feels like, of being a modern day human being, it looks like, and I might be totally wrong, but it looks like it's way more stressful than it maybe used to be. Is that fair, would you say?
I think that's right. I think
I've just never been able to switch off.
Well, I can sense it in myself. I've got a smartphone.
Yeah.
And I'm active on Facebook.
Yeah.
I get quite a lot of emails because we get, the people we teach come through, and I can access 2 papers on my phone, and it's bombarding you, and I'm conscious that I can get sucked in and distracted.
Yeah.
We were talking about it with my youngest son, and he was saying, I no longer use Facebook. I no longer do Twitter.
Right.
So I think some of the younger people are beginning to realise, and they do switch off.
Totally agree.
And there's also the blue light thing, last thing at night. So it I recognise through personal experience that it's a major distraction. And that wasn't the source of stress back, in the 90s when the stress was coming from all the tensions in the work. The union relationships were quite stressful, that kind of thing, and particularly dealing with things like, kids who 3 o'clock in the morning patter through and sort of climb into bed and that sort of thing. Yeah. So it is an issue, and it's something. Well, how can you deal with it? So this mindfulness stuff can help, and it 100%. Can help you understand that. I am being distracted, And like you know, I can now enjoy a walk better if I don't go out with headphones on. Because you're not distracted. You're looking down, walking, and you're listening, but you've lost what else is going on because your senses are just constrained to a bit of sight and.
Yeah, I took a train the other day to Paris. Well, I didn't. Didn't take a train the whole way there. I took a train from Chesterfield down to Manchester. So I spent about 2 or 3 hours on a train, and I said to myself before I left, I was like, right, I'm going to have the morning at least where I don't even look at my phone. I'm just going to leave it, and I'm just going to. Again, I feel like it's just introducing these little tools into you, knowing that, right, I need a few hours now to just disconnect and just be mindful. So I said to myself, right, I'm just going to, I walked to the train station, which was about 50 minutes, bought a new book. I bought Dan Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's still around.
Unbelievable book, yeah. It seems to have had a bit of a revive, I feel like. Because, anyway, a friend of mine was reading it, so I thought I'll buy that. And I'll really just try and just read the book on the train and not really be involved in anything digital. And it's really eye-opening when you're away from it, how much you notice people are involved in a mobile phone or a laptop or something. And I was sat on the train, and obviously, on the train you've got like 4 seats with a table in the middle. So I'm sat on one side, and this young girl gets on, and she was probably like 16, 17 or something like that. And she got on the train, and at that point we were going through like Hathersage, Grindleford, so it's beautiful scenery. It was a really nice day. It's, I'm sat there just trying to be a bit more mindful, like looking out the window and noticing it. And this girl got on, and she didn't look out of the window once. She looked on her phone, put her phone down, picked it back up, and it went on like that all the way to Manchester. And it, again, I feel like when you're really tuned into that, you go, I almost want to say, look, chill out,
Calm down.
Chill out, like look out the
Close your
window,
eyes.
and then same, went to the airport, and you go to the departures lounge, and I was looking around, and everybody was on their phone, just engrossed in just looking at the hand, basically the palm, and like I say, I was really interested what you thought of that and how you think all this stuff is going, because for me, running a business and having to somewhat be connected to things all the time, whether you're promoting things on social media or... And I think, again, like one thing you do have to be mindful of is the fact that you can run everything off a phone. So, I'm trying to be a little bit more lenient to what I think of people who are constantly on the phone, because you might think they're just mindlessly scrolling Instagram or Facebook, but they might actually be running a business. They might be doing their accounts on the phone, because you can do it all now, right? You can do everything, on your phone. So I'm trying to be a little bit more lenient and not be so judgmental on people that are just constantly looking at it. And, again, I'm pretty bad for it sometimes. But again, I'm just like curious, like what do you think? I mean, it must be strange seeing all this, happen, and how stressed people are. And
I mean, it's interesting because I've been with the technology, because we try to invest in the current technology. I mean, it certainly helped the family, because my oldest son got a job with Google.
Yeah, I remember you saying
it was only because we used to get
your son's got quite a high.
Well, he's done pretty well.
Yeah.
But
live in Canada, is that right or no?
No, he lives in San Francisco.
That's right.
But the youngest son is pretty good at IT as well. So I've always been. So I've got Pixel 4 XL in my pocket. And I can do a lot of stuff. I mean, we're running a concert in a couple of weeks, so I'm checking, I get Eventbrite and just checking how many have we got, putting the numbers up.
Right.
I've got Dropbox, I've got Drive, we've moved our website to Google G Suite.
Right.
So I'm there, and I recognise it. So I've got to exercise a bit of self-control. It is where the technology has got us, and it's then how are we going to manage that personally. But recognise the symptoms in ourselves, like the woman you were saying, constantly looking at it. Somehow, sooner or later, she might recognise that this has got a bit too far.
Yeah.
So one of the things all this is about is just doing a self-care check. You hold the mirror up and you look at yourself starkly in the mirror, and you say, well, how am I actually doing a whole number of fronts? That was the principle of self-assessment that I was using with large companies across Europe. You hold the mirror up, and there was a framework where you could say, how is our mission being, promulgated through the organisation?
Right.
So you hold the mirror up and say, yeah, I've got to do something about it. And I think that's why some people join our programs, because they've come to a point. We've had people who've been through serious operations. Maybe we've had one or two certainly with terminal illness.
Oh yeah.
And it's finding that these simple principles of mindfulness, taken in whatever way you think they can work for you, can be of great benefit. And recognising, yes, I'm using the phone too much. And maybe actually personally I need to go back and say, do I really need to have this bloody thing on all the time? But it is quite addictive. And it's,
sure.
I think it's called the dopamine fixes.
That's right,
Because it sparks in the brain.
It's a dopamine fix every time. So that's, hence why on Instagram you're checking for likes. It's almost like that kick of, someone likes that. And neurologically, I'm not sure, but it's, in certain countries, Instagram are getting rid of likes now. Have you seen that? So you can see it, but as a user, you don't see how many likes things have got. I think that probably is going to be a good move.
Yeah. But that's the cleverness of the San Francisco people, is they knew that is how it works, that they knew the neurophysiology of it and the brain chemistry. And so they've just made, billions on it. But we are where we are.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, it's about being mindful of where we are and trying to limit your time on it. There is various apps now, which I've not tried yet, where you can just limit your time on your phone. It'll just go off almost. You have to put a passcode in to get back on it. And I think that probably is quite useful. I mean, again, I've gone through stages, especially when as a company we're really busy or the podcast stuff's really busy, where you are glued to your phone because that's how you engage with people.
Well, unfortunately, I've been dopamine fixed here. I've got a message from my son saying, "Okay, I'll keep an eye on it."
Oh, really? on your watch?
On my watch, yeah.
Wow.
So, is that?
It's crazy, isn't it?
A sad old man, yeah.
I don't know.
But it's interesting but that's the connectivity that we've now got.
We're constantly on.
Yeah.
Constantly on.
Yeah.
And there's a very weird feeling when you're not on, because you're almost thinking, well, I do it. Okay, I'm going to turn my phone off for the day, and you go, yeah, but what if something happens? Like, what if someone wants to get hold of me? That's really, back not many years ago, you couldn't get hold of that person.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to the house. You'd have to ring the landline. It's.
But I can remember,
strange thing.
The benefits when the mobile phones first came in. My son, who's just WhatsApped me, and the messages come out on my watch. When he was seriously ill in the children's hospital, I just got my first mobile, official mobile phone from the office. Yeah. And I had it, and I was able to, keep my wife in touch about how he was.
There's huge benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is. But when you look at what it's doing to society, and again, people not being full of anxiety and stress, and maybe putting too much emphasis on how many likes did something get, or how many messages am I getting on Facebook. Again, it's something that personally I'm trying to be like, look, it doesn't really matter. On the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't really matter. But I think it's just moderation, isn't it? Yeah. Everything in moderation, including moderation.
But interesting, a connection with Dale Carnegie. Yeah. I did the course.
Did you really? Really? Wow.
And one of the main things, apart from a lot of life principles like don't criticize, condemn, and complain, was actually public speaking.
Right.
It was teaching people how to overcome the nerves of public speaking, because apparently public speaking is what most people fear more than anything. And there used to be a little competition, because if you won the group prize for that particular speech of the night, you got a book and everyone signed it. And that night when we had to say something that I think it was unpleasant or difficult happened, I just told the story about my youngest son who got the food poisoning.
Right.
And I think I had everybody nearly in tears. So, I got the prize, and it was one. I think it was, How to Win Friends and Influence People, signed by all the people in the group. I think that particular course, I don't know whether it was that one, was attended by some of the players of Sheffield United.
Oh, was it?
The local trainer, a guy called Scott White, great trainer, had managed to get Sheffield United to say that this is something that could benefit the players.
It's a fantastic book. I'm only halfway through it, but already there's some really key takeaways.
Yeah,
from
it's
the
odd
whole thing.
that.
Yeah.
Have you come across Tony Robbins then?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Do
Only
you want to
through-
go down that road?
I mean, only through now, like, he does a lot of podcasts, appearances and stuff like that. So yeah, I've not done any of his stuff, a physical course, but I'm quite aware of his work. As for the rabbit hole, I mean, again, if you are in a point in your life where you need motivation and you need some form of direction, it's probably got to be a go-to, surely. You go to something like that that's going to shake up your thoughts a little bit and maybe get you out of the little ruts that you might be in your life. I'm not too sure. What do you think?
Well, again, I was quite fortunate because
You did a course?
in the 90s.
I remember.
This guy, his name's Richard Field.
Right.
He's now Professor Dr. Richard Field, former master cutter and so on. Got Tony to Sheffield.
Right.
And there was a big thing in the arena. Got 5,000 people into the arena because we'd set up a team sponsored by Tony Robbins to try and do stuff in Sheffield. And I think the thing I was doing was I'd set up the Sheffield and South Yorkshire Total Quality Forum. So I was doing that as something to contribute to the business community. So taking in some of the knowledge that I was picking up in Royal Mail, but then translating it to the business community. We ended up actually with £1 million of European funding to support small businesses do more with quality.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, Tony sponsored about 12 of us to go on his courses, and I did Date with Destiny and Life Mastery, both in Hawaii.
Did you really? Wow.
So I
Jeez.
was, pretty well all expenses paid by the Tony Robbins Foundation. And it was an amazing, that was another sort of breakthrough, because it built on actually, the meditation and the running, but introduced you some other life practices. And in particular, the importance of getting a life purpose and values. And that's one of the things we cover briefly on our course, Purpose. And we have the poem by Mary Oliver, Summer Day, where she asked the question in the poem, what am I going to do with my one wild and wondrous life? It's an important question that everybody should attend to. What is my purpose? Yeah. And actually, spending, it was 3 days in this superb environment of Hawaii, on the beach hotel, intense, 12, 15-hour days. Right. Little time to go out and enjoy the sun and the sea. I came away with... what my purpose was.
Really?
I think that's what's kept me doing what I'm doing
That's incredible.
and what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So I can only commend the process, whether or not you can afford to go to Hawaii.
Yeah, they're not. It's not
They're quite expensive.
Yeah.
Life Mastery was a bit razzmatazz, possibly not quite as in depth of transformation. But both in an introductory seminar that he ran in Birmingham at the National Exhibition Centre. What was that? Unleash the Power Within.
Okay.
And the second, Life Mastery, I did 2 firewalks.
Right.
So the firewalks are quite an interesting thing because it's that fear of walking on fire. But that introduces you to the idea of a mantra. Okay. So that it gets you all sort of wound up. You're going to do a firewalk, and one of the things is you put all the things you want to forget or your fears on bits of paper and throw it into the fire in the car park, which then becomes the coals that you walk over. The mantra in Birmingham was cool moss. So you prepare yourself for the fire.
Oh, that it's cool moss, right?
Cool moss, and you just say it over and over again. And the idea is to walk steadily and steadfastly on the hot coals. If you stop, you get burned, because by having the steady pace, the conductivity of charcoal, you can read about it, is quite low. So the heat doesn't get conducted as long as you don't keep on the coals for too long.
Yeah.
So you go along this, I don't know, it's about 20 yards or something like that. Come at the end, but it was actually a meditative approach. It was saying you can get very quickly using a mantra to still the brain, calm the mind, to face something which is an innate fear, fire. So I can recommend it.
Definitely. That's crazy that you did a Tony Robbins class. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it was just fortunate, and that led me into Brussels, led me into the university. So it was about life decisions that might not otherwise have been made, because I was doing something which was much more far-reaching and achieving. Well, he was all about doing breakthroughs. I mean, breakthroughs have different forms. So I suppose this was a form of breakthrough that was beginning to emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that I've looked at quite often. I'd love to go and do one of those things. His documentary on Netflix was really good.
Yeah.
That was super interesting.
Yeah.
But like you said before, it all sort of like, without doing that, you wouldn't be where you are right now, and it all sort of intermingles, doesn't it?
No, I think it was recognising that the core value is making a difference.
Yeah.
And it's making a difference in whatever way you can. So the teaching of mindfulness as a volunteer, doing a job as a volunteer ranger, working to set up an entity that introduces small businesses to total quality management. It's about making a difference. But then you find that it's all connected. On my emails, I have everything connects to everything as a strapline, because it does.
It's true.
And what you find is the work that I was doing in organisations and still continue to do with people draws from some of the core principles that is called Buddhism.
Yeah.
The guy that developed the whole of the approach to the total quality management was leading initiatives in Japan after the last war to help Japanese industry rebuild itself. And his simple principles of plan, do, check, act, going around a spiral of continuous improvement, comes back to the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. This is going to really turn off a lot of your listeners.
No. I love this sort of stuff.
But to make these connections.
Yeah.
And we're now looking in our little centre at another form of this, is something called the spiral, where you express gratitude in all that you've got at the moment, but you then look at where the pain is in yourself, in others. You start looking at that through new eyes, and then you go forth. And the woman who's developed this simple approach, called Joanna Macy, uses a dandelion as a metaphor for this. So the root is the root of resilience, because if you try and get rid of dandelions, you find if you leave a bit of root, they regrow.
Right. Yeah.
And then you've got the flower, and then you've got the what do you call it? The thing at the top of where the seeds come.
Okay.
Clock, dandelion
That's
clock.
right. Yeah.
And the seeds going forth, and that becomes a fractal spiral. So we're looking at that in the context of nature, the environment, and the importance of sustainability.
Okay.
So, as I say, all these things come back connecting. So when I was working in organisations and we were doing things like staff and student experience surveys, that was understanding where all the pain was, because you get the feedback and then you start to do something about it and you improve it.
Right.
So Tony Robbins, I had the principle of continuous improvement. He called it continuous and never-ending improvement.
Right.
Can I? And that's at the core of all of this. So continuous improvement applied to self, hold the mirror up, where am I? Where is it that I need to do things slightly differently? For me, 30 odd years ago, it was I needed to get on top of the stress and anxiety.
Right. And you think that's something that people should do more often is just take that little step back
and to
review where you are in your life.
Yeah, just to take stock.
Yeah.
And you can do it more systematically and say, well, is there anything I need to do differently? I mean, people often do this at the turn of the year. It's called the New Year's resolutions. But if that is done in a deep way, quite major change can come out of it. And that's where retreats, which are encouraged, when you've done a course and, we have one-day retreats. We ran a workshop on purpose and values to give an opportunity for people who've been through our course to have a deeper look at the idea of purpose.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that maybe don't live in Sheffield that can't have access to your courses. Have you got any little, I don't know, maybe things or books or anything like that people should check out to sort of introduce these ideas and stuff?
Well, I mean, for a start, if all the stuff that we teach is available on our website.
Oh, right, brilliant. I'll link to that in the show description for anybody listening.
All the meditations are there. But there's any, if you just do, search meditation MP3s, hundreds of thousands will come up. So that there's a lot of stuff available on the internet. There are apps. And the more common ones are Headspace.
Calm is really good, yeah.
I use Insight Timer to time. I just use it to time the meditation because it does a gong at the start and a gong at the end. When I was doing transcendental meditation, they advise you to peek at your watch.
Oh, really?
Which is not very meditative. You're meditating because I suppose the danger is you could sort of do it forever.
I think that's one of the problems there is that it's knowing where to start with this stuff.
Yes.
And before I did your course, I was already introduced to the idea of meditating a little bit, and I'd sort of made that discovery that this is something I need to do to handle my own stress and anxiety levels. And again, something that's come up quite a lot on the podcast is ways in which you can do that, whether it's riding or running or whatever. But it's just knowing how do you take that first deep dive into it, and then obviously people really struggle with keeping it up, and that seems to be the constant thing with anyone that's got into meditation is they go, oh yeah, I did it for a little while, but I always forget, or I never have time to do it. I think that's something that is really important because again, people just go, oh, I don't have time. I think everyone has got time to do a 10-minute meditation every day, but sometimes, you're that caught up in your own anxiety and stress and busyness. I hate that term, busyness. But you do just go, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. And you just constantly put it off.
Yeah.
Do you even, with your expertise and your, you're ingrained in the culture of it now as well. Do you still struggle with that? Do you ever go?
Yes, I do. I mean, like going on holiday, if I've got to get out early in the morning, where's the time? But the trick is to take it into everyday life. So whilst I might not have meditated, more than likely I'll cook the evening meal because I really like cooking.
Yeah.
And when I was in this highly stressed job here in Sheffield, I used to come home and cook the tea. And the chopping of the onions, the preparation of a meal takes maybe half an hour. I could do that mindfully. So that's the informal mindfulness that you can access any time. And we say, it can start in the morning.
Yeah.
You get up and you brush your teeth. You have a shower. You have your first cup of coffee. All those can be done with the focus just on the brushing the teeth, not worrying about the first meeting. Having the coffee, just sitting there and savouring, because savouring is one of the elements of positive psychology that we teach is very, very powerful. So you come back to authors. The primary author that started it all off is John Kabat-Zinn. So a number of books. I think the main one is called Full Catastrophe Living, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's an odd one for mindfulness. But that describes his approach to mindfulness-based stress reduction. But simple to read ones, very straightforward, lots of practical advice. 2 books by Ruby Wax, who has done the master's degree course. A bit different from the one I did in Aberdeen, but she's done it at Oxford, got a MSc in mindfulness.
Right. Wow. I didn't know that. Really wise.
But based on mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So she's written two very accessible books. But a lovely Vietnamese monk who lives in France called Thich Nhat Hanh has written some, again, very good books just to describe these sort of nuances that it's not just about being able to sit down for 20 minutes and meditate. It's about recognizing that simple things like washing up, if you ever wash up, because most people have got dishwashers, you can do washing up mindfully. I like gardening, mowing the lawn. You probably tend the chickens.
Yeah.
So the opportunities to be mindful are already there. And a lot of people who say, I can't do it, already do it. They just don't recognize they do it. And some of the elite athletes who you will interview for these podcasts will be in mindfulness states a lot of the time. You can't go out on a 60-mile cycle ride into the Peak District without being mindful. You're going to kill yourself.
Yeah, it's true.
Again, I couldn't not do it when I was running, and just found running because I'd experienced the experience of meditation. Mindfulness could come from the running. I mean, on our courses, there are much more women than men. And I remember listening to something, why don't men do this? And I think the reply was, well, they've got hobbies. There was an article that was circulated to our group by a doctor actually in our mindful aging group, came out of a model railway magazine to say that model railway building is a mindfulness activity. But if you've seen the intricacy of these engines that are created, our neighbour up the road, builds one, 3 feet long. He disappears into his shed. This is the man's shed thing.
Right,
and does his thing. And that's probably the way he is mindful.
100%.
So you can't be doing that if you're thinking about, oh my God, that meeting yesterday was terrible and my mother-in-law's really pissing me off, and that sort of thing.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Very
true. So anyway, the number of books on it. I mean, John's book is John Darwin, Mindfulness-Based Life Enhancement, which is a good but complex read. There's loads of books available to download on Kindle or to buy.
Yeah. I remember as well when we were doing the course, you said that your main objective was it to make Sheffield a mindfulness city. Is that a mindful city?
Yes.
Are you still? Is that like the end goal with all this?
We're up to. I think over 700 have now been through our training.
Wow. And it's free as well, I might add, just for people listening.
I mean, and the reason is both John and I are retired, and the people that support us are retired. So it's much easier for tax management purposes not to charge. The accounting would be horrendous.
Yeah.
But we are getting into other interesting areas. John Darwin has worked with, he's run one course for visually impaired people.
Wow.
I'm currently working with a group of refugees from places like Africa and Syria. With a colleague, volunteer ranger, we ran a Walking in Nature day at Longshore Estate, which was part doing a mindful walk and part a little workshop.
Wow.
And from that, I started yesterday a short 4-week course, a cut-down version of our whole 8-week course. I think there were about 11 or 12 came. Again, refugees from different countries. And it's getting out there in other environments. I work in the Peak District National Park with this guy Phil Bradley. Started the first mindfulness walk. I ran 2 last year under the Peak District Guided Walk program. We got 6 planned for next year.
And these are just walks where it's pretty much in silence, and then you review or you go out with a goal, is that correct?
No, I mean, we just walk, and I introduce some of the principles of mindful walking, and we walk in silence for a bit, we stop, we take in a 360-degree view, which is just stopping, taking a few deep breaths with your eyes closed, open your eyes, and just to the vista that's around you. The Peak District's great, you get great views.
Yeah.
So both of those are out of Hartington. One goes down the Dove and one goes up the Dove.
Okay.
There's a colleague volunteer ranger who is running dementia walks, so for people with dementia, and he's asked me to see whether I can introduce some simple mindfulness stuff to these walks. And we do Street Wisdom.
Okay.
Street Wisdom is a 3-hour walking event. There's one coming up in Sheffield on the 27th of November, and that's another way of getting into mindfulness walks. So these are the things that are starting to emerge. Our little centre has joined an entity called Cohesion Sheffield, which is trying to increase the inclusivity in the city, and particularly working with these disadvantaged groups. So hence, we're working with these groups of
That must be extremely
refugees.
gratifying for you.
Well, the most gratifying part yesterday, this is how it goes. This is the reality of teaching to groups like that. Starts at 9:30. At 9:30, one person came in. About 10 minutes later, 3 or 4 came in. And then the main group arrived. One of the first group apologised. She has to go. She stayed for the first meditation, but she's sorting out bags of wet clothes because she was made homeless and was affected by the incredibly heavy rains we've been having.
Yeah.
But she said, I'll be back next week. And then we were just about to start the next one. The door opens, and a woman who, I think, where was she from? Iran or something. Anyway, comes in pushing a pushchair. And it's the first course I've run where we had a little baby. But the baby was superbly mindful all the way through. And was in the room, just around the corner, the little annex room. And it was beautiful. And, these people benefiting from this because of the stuff that they've been through. You try not to ask what the journey was.
How are you reaching those people then?
That's through an organisation called Voluntary Action Sheffield, who have a New Beginnings project.
Right.
And the New Beginnings project, led by this lovely Ugandan woman, Winnie, she organises activities for them. And through Cohesion Sheffield, we offered to do some mindfulness with them. And that's where we are. So we ran one walking in nature event, and then we have started this 4-week course. I'm doing that in the Central Library, where one of our team, who's the chair of our little entity, Liz, is the manager with responsibility for the health and well-being initiatives that the library has. And this is what the library wants to do. They want to offer these sorts of services to these disadvantaged groups. And that's back to the value of making a difference.
Yeah.
So if it calmed that woman who's homeless down just for 15 minutes, it made a difference to her.
Definitely. And to everybody else as well that's there, right? Everyone involved, no doubt yourself. Everyone.
So, we've got, city of 500,000 people. We've, got a long way to go. But the gratifying bit, we teamed up with a pianist called Peter, I think it's pronounced Fagerlint.
Okay.
And we're doing a mindfulness and music evening in December.
Nice.
And we've got now, I think it's about 95 signed up.
Brilliant.
So that's quite a lot coming in to this event, which again is free.
Where's that one?
It's the Upper Chapel.
Okay.
Because if you start making connections and you reach out to these different groups, we've done a couple of evening talks to members of the Upper Chapel. It's in Norfolk Street. It's a beautiful building. You go inside, it's absolutely superb.
Right.
I led a guided walk for their strollers group. And they've supported and hosted a couple, at least one Street Wisdom event. So you make these connections, you
Yeah.
build partnerships,
Yeah.
and things happen then.
Yeah, definitely. Your
So
network
we
is your
approached
network.
Peter, who has been doing mindfulness music concerts of about an hour, and we normally have a continuation session in December that focuses on music, and we sort of put the two together, and we've now got an evening. But coming back to your point that you do a course, you have an app, you've got to keep it going.
Yeah.
And the realization was we had to give people a bit of a boost on a monthly basis. So once a month, we organise a 2-hour session where we go back and revisit some of the topics on our course.
Okay.
Sometimes we go back and visit them in more depth. And we've had a couple of special evenings. We did an evening where we did a couple of presentations on the science of mindfulness and meditation, where we looked into the gamut of scientific evidence that is supporting the fact that this is all a great idea.
That's something as well that I think is important, is understanding how it actually is affecting you. I think that's, you sort of feel it from your core level, I guess, but actually understanding how it is actually affecting you and the way you're going to have the rest of your day and rest of your life, I guess, as well. And that from doing your course, that's been almost like the biggest takeaway is, well, we're sat here now doing this, but, it's just having that toolkit to be able to insert whenever things do get a little bit tough.
Yeah.
And that's, it's really cool. Again, I need to be a little bit more personally, a little bit more on it with taking a bit more time out each and every day. But again, like you said, even the other day, getting on the train and thinking, I need to do this today. Like I need to stop and chill and have my mind a little bit more clearer, because we are constantly getting bombarded with information and time goes pretty fast when you're like that.
Yeah.
I think that's the nice thing about meditating, is just having 20 minutes of just
Well, I mean,
chill.
again, it is about that practice, doing it on a regular basis, but not striving too much, not beating yourself up if you're not doing it, because it's about recognizing where you are at the moment and being kind to yourself, being compassionate to yourself. I suppose for me, maintaining it has been partly studying it at Aberdeen, and then teaching it, and if you're doing courses, I've been doing stuff virtually every week.
You're constantly
doing it.
Yeah.
And hence the continuation sessions that we run. That's what we call them. Right. That is one of the core principles. You teach it, you practice it, and then you've got to provide this this backup support for the people. And people come on our course several times. But interestingly, we've taken it into the third age. There's the University of the Third Age in Sheffield. It's for people who are retired, 3,000 members, really very active. So when you get old like me, you've got to live your life to the full because you haven't got much time left. So anyway, the University of the Third Age, runs a whole range of activities. I'm in a walking group, and there must be about 30 walking groups.
Really?
But we set up a mindful aging group. We've run 2 courses, and we finished one the week before last. And this lady who lives around the corner from me actually has come. She's a member of. She's done our 8-week course. She comes regularly to our continuation sessions. She joined the mindful aging group. She came on the 4-week course again. Came to the meeting the following week, and she was there last night.
Wow.
Now I've seen her now. so she obviously is getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So as you get to our sort of age, mindfulness and the full gamut of practices starts to become even more beneficial. So that was the research I did for my dissertation. John had done some preparatory research work, sort of looking at the context of mindful aging, and we ended up delivering a paper to a meeting of the cross-party parliamentary group on mindfulness at the Houses of Parliament. So there is a group in the Houses of Parliament that's been doing mindfulness for about the last 5 or 6 years. Not that you'd notice the...
I was going to say that could be quite beneficial right now.
But there is a mindfulness initiative.
Is there really?
It's trying to support getting it into all parts of society.
Right.
And this was saying there is a relevance for people as they age.
Yeah.
Because it certainly helps.
Yeah, no doubt. Even, any age, for sure. 100%
Well,
helps.
I mean,
Yeah.
the evidence is that if you just take on board the principles of positive psychology, it adds about 7 years to your life.
Is that right?
That's quite important.
It is, yeah.
When you're our sort of age.
No, it is. Wow, so what else is going on with you then? Like, I'm interested because you've got so much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, where's all this going for you? The mindfulness stuff and...
Well, I suppose it's actually reaching out into these other areas.
Yeah.
Knowing that, it is a benefit generally to society. I think it's important to see it in the context of social change. So a lot of the teaching of mindfulness is to people who are stressed, have anxiety and that sort of thing. And that's a bit... It's important, but it's focused more on the self. I think it's reaching out and to say, well, how can all these principles apply in the broader society to, to deal with some of the societal problems? I don't know the answers to half of that. But on a personal basis, the wives of both my sons are pregnant again. So we got 2 grandchildren coming up, one in... February or March, going to be born in San Francisco.
Right.
The other one in May, going to be born in Sheffield. So we've got that to look forward on.
Brilliant.
Top of our brilliant grandson and granddaughter. My oldest son's coming over with his wife and a pregnant wife for Christmas.
Fantastic.
So there's a lot of family stuff. I mean, tomorrow... And every Wednesday we do childcare for Reese, the grandson.
Right.
So you've got to get a bit of balance.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's making sure I sort of stay fit and recognise there's a bit of work to do on maintaining the gym. So getting to the gym more
physically and
than I am at the
mentally
moment.
fit.
Yes, I think that's important.
Yeah, it is for sure.
My wife and I are going on a short trip to Whitby to do some walking around the hills behind Whitby and also to celebrate being there with a plate of fish and chips.
Whitby fish and chips, mate.
Yeah, so...
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that you've got to get this in balance and maybe... Trouble is, if you push out all these boundaries, you suddenly get... Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do a podcast? There's a academy runs 2 primary schools based over in Tinsley, and we've been asked to introduce some of the principles to the teachers there.
Really?
So we're pushing out the boundaries, but we've got a small team. It's keeping a balance of how much we
how
can
much you can do. Yeah. My girlfriend works in a school, and they do it quite a bit now with kids.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, they're starting to really introduce it and having kids be able to sit in silence for a few minutes. I think they've got a few sort of what we call initiatives and also companies that come in and they run that for kids, which I think is really good.
Yeah, I know it's...
Imagine if you could introduce all this at a young age.
Yes. Well, there's more and more. I think the centre at Oxford University has got a multi-million-pound project looking at mindfulness in schools. And if it's taught at an early age, it's going to be much more beneficial later on.
Yeah.
I think my 2 lads used to say, "You better go upstairs, Dad."
Really.
And one of the things was Tony Robbins introduced to just get on top of the old anger bit was to think of cabbages, which is a bit of an odd thing.
Right.
And my sons used to joke, "Cabbages, Dad, cabbages," as we were, because I wasn't very good at waiting in queues. I used to be quite impatient, but I'm a lot better. The best thing in the queue, particularly if you're trying to get into the United States and you're faced with an hour, is just to, breathe normally and naturally and just smile. It makes it a lot easier. And just to recognise that this is just a process and it's not working terribly well, but you will get through eventually.
100%.
Same in a supermarket. If you're going through a queue in the supermarket, well, many people bypass that is to smile and say it's not the fault of the person at the checkout that this queue is here.
Yeah.
It's the system that hasn't provided enough staff.
For sure.
So just be kind and compassionate.
Compassionate, yeah,
and not do the complaining, condemning, and
I feel like life's so much nicer when you're like that as well.
Yeah.
Again, one of the things in the Carnegie book is giving people compliments and how much that affects you. That's really, I did that the other day actually with somebody, which was really nice. Someone who looked pretty grumpy behind a supermarket checkout.
Yeah, it's just to smile and say how you're doing.
Yeah,
or something
how's it going,
like
man?
Sometimes
You okay?
you get interesting conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's these simple little life tools that reduce the stress in yourself.
Yeah.
And saying thank you, but gratitude, being grateful for things, and if that's done systematically, like recounting 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, that has a positive impact on well-being. They've done the research. So there's a lot in this.
There is.
Yeah.
There is, mate. You're stacked with knowledge. It's really cool. Really,
well, I suppose
really cool.
it comes from the other principle that you pick up if you work in Sheffield Hallam University is the importance of learning through life.
Yeah.
I've kept learning right up to getting a master's degree, and I'm still learning. Looking at the work of, Joanna Macy and how that links into what I was studying yonks ago.
Right.
General system theory. We won't go down that road.
No. Awesome. All right, man. Well, we said we'd do a sort of mindful meditation at the end of this for people that are listening who might need that first tool to get them started. Is that are you still cool to do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do that. And what I'll do is I'm actually gonna, for the listeners, I'll put a link in the show description where you can download just this mindfulness meditation. It's going to be 3 minutes? Are we aiming for?
Yes, it's called a 3-minute breathing space. It usually takes about
5 minutes.
But if I speak very quickly, I can do it in 3 minutes. But I think I'll slow it down.
That's cool.
A bit.
And I'll do it if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
And then
so it'll start by giving you some bit of guidance about how to sit and that sort of thing.
Cool. All right, we'll do that.
Putting your cup down and.
Okay. So if you're listening to this, which obviously you hopefully are, you're driving, probably don't bother doing this. Wait until you get home. And enjoy. Mike, let's do it.
Okay, so this is the 3-minute breathing space, and it's something that's very easy, and you can learn to do it without listening to anything or any guidance. And it's a practice that, if you can visualize it, is in the form of an hourglass. So we're going to start at the open end. And we do this by, first of all, taking a very definite posture. This is important. So it's sitting upright with the back erect, a sense of being relaxed and dignified. So you're beginning to let your body express a sense of being present and awake. And the first of 3 steps, you begin by closing your eyes, if that's okay, and becoming aware, really aware of what's going on with you right now. Looking inside, being aware of what's going through your mind, what thoughts are around. Here again, as best you can, just noting the thoughts as mental events. We note them, and then we note the feelings that are around at the moment, and trying to turn toward any sense of discomfort or unpleasant feelings. So rather than try to push them away or shut them out, we just acknowledge them. Perhaps saying, "Oh, there you are, that's how it is right now." And again, with sensations in the body. Are there any sensations of tension, holding or whatever? And again, we bring awareness to them, simply noting them and saying, "Okay, that's how it is right now." And in step 2, we begin to gather our attention to focus on the physical sensations of the breath. We've stepped out of automatic pilot when we didn't even notice the breath. We're now focusing on that single object, the movements of the breath, as it comes into the nose, nostrils, into the chest and abdomen. So we're really gathering ourselves, focusing our attention down there in the movements of the chest and the belly, the rise and fall of the breath. Just spending a minute or so to focus on the movement of the abdominal wall. Moment by moment, breath by breath, as best you can. So that you know when the breath is moving in and you know when the breath is moving out. Just binding your attention to the pattern of the movement down there in the belly, gathering yourself, using the anchor of the breath to really be present. And now in step 3, expanding our field of awareness around our breathing, so we include a sense of the body as a whole. So we get this more spacious awareness, sensing the body as a whole, including any tightness or sensations related maybe to holding in the shoulders, the neck, the back or the face. Following the breath as if the whole body is breathing. Then when you're ready, just allowing your eyes to open and bringing this expanded, more accepting and spacious awareness to the next moments of the day, whatever circumstances you find yourself in, as it continues to unfold.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. It's very kind. So hopefully people have enjoyed that. If that was the first meditation, first sort of access to it.
It's a good start to just do something as simple as that. How do you feel after that?
Mate, you know, sometimes when I do that, I go really dizzy. And that's exactly, I don't know if it's caffeine as well.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever
I don't do the dizziness bit.
Do you not? Sometimes, every now and again, it's really rare it happens, but that was one of those times where I had to open my eyes and be like, whoa.
It's probably listening to me for the last hour.
But sometimes I remember it happening a lot on your course more than ever, because that is a place where it was, there's like no distractions at all. I feel like sometimes if you do this at home and maybe there's somebody else in the house, you're aware of other people, you're aware of maybe the TV's on downstairs or if it's whatever. But sometimes when like it's super quiet, I go really dizzy and I have to open my eyes and just be like, whoa. It's strange. But yeah, I remember that happening more.
It's important to be sitting down when you do this, not to be driving. So that health warning is very important, actually.
For sure.
And that's the thing, that our course, it isn't all sweetness and light. Sometimes, difficult things happen, difficult memories from way back come up. So, we just learn just to accept that that's what it is. And it is about going inside. It's about understanding how the mind works better, getting to know your mind, because often you don't know it really.
True.
It's just there, just doing stuff, often automatically.
That's true. I remember, again, doing the course, having some really, really nice conversations with people as well. And there was a woman on that course, actually, who was terminally ill. And I remember, there was a certain part where we sort of said, look, what's brought you here? I remember there was, and what was really nice is you speak to different people because you split off into groups, into 2s or 3s or whatever it was. And I remember her saying that, and that was a huge wake up call for me, because the reason I was there is because I was struggling with anxiety and stress, possibly a little bit of depression.
But you're not dying.
No, but exactly, and and I remember me saying my thing of being like, I'm here because I struggle a little bit with stress and anxiety and etc. And I handed over to her. I was like, what about you? She said, well, I'm terminally ill. And it was like, whoa, that's a big reality check, you know, maybe that was, and I think that doing these sort of practices, again, they open you up, be more compassionate and understand people and listen better, you know. So
yeah, she was brilliant. She came back
really,
several,
the
you know,
same.
did the course several times. She brought her mother
Wow.
as well. She was an inspiration.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, again, mate, I want to say massive thank you.
It's been
doing
brilliant.
this.
I mean, it's good.
Nice and chilled,
It's a personal reflection because, you know, a lot happens in a lifetime. And thanks very much. It's a privilege to be able to tell this story.
For sure. And hopefully people
warts and all.
Yeah, exactly. No, but hopefully people, you know, again, it's these little conversations that spark that thing in somebody to go, I've been thinking about trying a meditation, and hopefully that's you know the objective of this podcast.
So it's back to if it makes a difference for one.
Exactly. Just one person, then I'd be happy. So usually what we do at this point is hand over to you can tell people where they can follow you, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You know, have you got any assets people can go to? You mentioned the website.
Yes.
What's that?
It's mindfulenhance.org.
Mindful. There'll be a link in the show description for people.
Everything on there is free. We host the Sheffield Mindfulness Community on Facebook. We've got 440 members. And it would be good to have some posts, people's experience, actually, particularly from your community of, you know, elite sports people. Because we want to share the fact that, you know, often mindfulness is already being used in something, they might not call it, but it's being used in training regimes.
Okay. So if you are listening and you want to head over and join the group, even post about your experiences, that'd be really helpful. It's always nice to hear from people. And the same on my part, if people listening, it'd be great to hear from you. If you find this episode helpful, useful, interesting, reach out, let us know. I can pass on some messages to you as well, because there's usually quite a few come in after an episode, which is really nice. So yeah, again, mate, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this.
It's a delight. Thanks, David.
All right, it's a wrap. Easy. Thank you. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say a massive thank you to Mike for doing the podcast. I know that one's come out of left field, but like I said at the beginning of this episode, now we've got the studio here in Sheffield, it makes sense to bring in some people that are a little bit out of our normal wheelhouse and introduce some ideas and some thoughts and stuff to people. Big thank you once again to everybody who helps make this podcast a reality. Thank you to Sax Underwear, the best underwear on planet Earth. If you haven't tried them already, saxunderwear.com. If you do grab a set, send a photo over. You wouldn't even believe how many photos I get of people wearing Sax underwear. Keep them coming. It's great. I'm going to say it's great to see, but yeah, it is great to see, but not too much. Massive thank you, obviously, again to Works and their Hydra Shot. It's coming around to that time of year, guys. You've got to keep your bike clean and your house and your pets and family members. You've got to keep them clean, keep them odor free, keep them dirt free. Works, the Hydra Shot is available from Works retailers, so you can grab one from the likes of Amazon, Argos, Halfords, Toolstation, their official eBay store, or head to workseurope.com. And also, you guys, you know, this thing wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for you people listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, I would love to hear from you. Shoot me an email, a message on Instagram, Facebook, share it with your friends. Whatever you can do, it goes a long, long way. All right, that's a wrap. Enjoy the rest of the week, and hopefully you enjoy a new mindfulness practice. Let me know. Peace out. Oosh.
Took a fall.